private sector. Then we want to also strengthen capacity building or capacity and awareness of IT across the country, across Uganda. We're also involved in IT research and innovation, and we are supporting a number of different innovations across the country, universities, students, as well as SMEs. We are also championing information security, and that's why I specifically sit. And we ensure that our data, our citizens, and the systems that we support are heavily guarded and used in responsible ways. Lastly, we are also promoting development, economic development, through supporting the business processing outsourcing industry, as well as the IT ECs. Okay. So, in summary, these are some of the services that we have under NITA. We have infrastructure services, where we have the National Information Technology, the National Backbone Infrastructure. We have, under this, we have green transmission sites. We have public Wi-Fi across the country. And we also offer data center services, cloud data center services, as well as infrastructure as a service within our data center. And creating an IT enabling environment, we have established several cyber laws and regulations. We are heavily involved in development of IT standards and guidelines, ICT policies. We do certification and compliance of ICT companies under government, and we are also involved in several assessments, compliance assessments across ICT. When it comes to information security, we run the mandate of implementing the National Information Security Framework. We also have the National Information Advisory Group, which basically advises government as well as private sector on the areas of cybersecurity. Then we also established the National SAT, and under the National SAT, we do monitoring of cybersecurity incidents, as well as we do incident management in case we've had a cybersecurity attack, whether private or government, to come in and support. For capacity building, we've built support for BPOs, innovation hubs. We're doing IT research. I talked about this. We're also doing advisory services, as well as IT project management. In terms of automation, we are heavily involved in business process automation, e-government applications and shared services. We are here, we're doing a lot of integration with different government systems so that you can basically have a one-stop center for all services for government. Then we are also involved in development and digitizing of different MDAs, including districts, in terms of having their services available to citizens via the web. So, in a nutshell, that's what NITA is all about, for those who didn't know about NITA. So I'll dive into the subject for today. This is what we are going to cover today. And my goal here is to give you practical, actionable strategies that at the end of the day, you will be able to implement. So we are going to look at data, why it's important. We're going to look at the law, a specific section of the law that talks about our responsibilities as data protection officers, or as well as individuals involved in data protection. Then I'll dive into how to secure the data in the two different worlds, the physical world, as well as the data in the digital world. That is data that you have that is digitally saved. Then I'll also guide you on how to build a culture of compliance within your organizations and be able to support your organization remain compliant with the regulations. As we close, I'll give you some key takeaways on how you can quickly win from the discussions that we shall have had, as well as taking some questions. If time allows, we shall also taking some questions. And for those that I'll be able to respond to, I'll respond to. The others will be responded to with time. So just brace yourself. But before we start, I'd like to start with a simple story, just to give you some sort of context about the two worlds that we're going to be discussing. So this is a practical story. It's a real world example from an entity. It was an NGO that had implemented some good policies around data protection and cybersecurity. And the DPO in charge at the time had implemented, they had a system, which is a CRM system, which manages all their clients. So everything had actually been moved online, the data was online. But when it came to payment processing, there was a bit of a manual requirement. For instance, in this particular instance, there was a need for the accountant to process a payment for a client, but they had to do a manual, they had to do like a manual payment request for the client. So the accountant picks the file from the cabinet, from the client's file, scans it, but unfortunately they were going for a meeting, so they leave the document on their desk, they move out, and they leave the file on the desk. So remember, the file was being scanned into the system, so it was a physical file being scanned into the system so they can process the payment. So there was a junior officer still who, around the same time, I believe you're familiar with the concept of phishing emails, and these ones are popular ways that hackers use to manipulate people to get information and lead to data breaches. So around the same time, there was a number of phishing emails that were actually coming in. So one junior staff was phished and convinced that the email was coming from the MD of the company, and they were requesting for clients' data. Now, of course, it seemed urgent, it seemed legitimate. Those who have dealt with phishing emails understand how these ones usually look like. It seemed urgent, it seems legitimate, so this person rushes to act. And because the accountant wasn't on their desk, she realized that the file that she actually needs to share on email is actually on the desk. So she takes a picture, uploads the file onto email, and responds to the hacker. Of course, the results were a significant data breach. All these files were now publicized because she did not know that actually the person who had sent the email was not the actual MD for the company, but it was basically a hacker. So this is a typical story that gives you a real life, maybe a combination of what a physical security lapse, which in this case would be the fact that there were physical documents left on the table, as well as a social engineering. Now this is on the digital side. Social engineering attack can be combined to basically lead to a data breach. So in just from that preamble, we would know that when it comes to data security, it's not just about what you have physically, what you have digitally. We must holistically come up with strategies that considers both aspects, physical as well as data that is online. And that's what we are here to do today. So I'll proceed with the presentation, but that story will just give you some context. So data is everywhere. Just the fact that data is everywhere, so are the risks. And as you all know, your organizations that support, organizations that you actually deal with as individuals, heavily collect vast amount of personal data on a daily basis. And this data is coming in through different forms, emails, applications, the forms you fill when you're actually entering some of the buildings. There's a lot of personal data that's being collected daily. Personal data in description is anything that can uniquely identify a person. So even footage, pictures, as you walk through the streets of Kampala and someone is taking a picture, that's your personal, and your picture shows up in that particular, in that person's photo. That's actually personal data. So there is daily collection of personal data, but because of the fact that we are collecting a lot of data, the risks are also massive. So I picked out some of the biggest examples of the risks that we face. There are mainly three. So there are data breaches, and these ones are basically unauthorized access to sensitive information. And what the impact for this would be is financial loss, legal consequences, and as well as reputational damage to the institutions. There are also scenarios of, there's also a breach that we call unauthorized access, where you have internal or external actors accessing data without permission. And of course, this compromises the integrity of the data, and it can lead to potential data leakages. There's also misuse of information. And this can be described as improper use of information that has been collected. Maybe it was collected for opening, let me use a bank account, for example. If they collect your data to use a bank account, but then you find it on the streets, that's improper misuse of information. So one of the things that, one of the impacts you get in this case would be loss of client's trust. If I find my data that was supposed to be intended for some other purpose, but I find it on the streets of Kampala, it means I can't trust the person I gave the data. And of course, the Data Protection Act and the law stresses some regulatory fines in case someone reports a breach like that. So there are also regulatory fines that would be involved. So the breach does not just lead to potential regulatory fines, but also long-term damage for clients' trust and the organizational reputation. So it's important that you look at this more as far the impact of maybe what would happen in case personal data or in case you have a breach of personal data as far-reaching beyond just you losing the data. There are other consequences that would come in place. Okay. So what is the our legal obligation? What does the Act say? So this one I'll try and read it out slowly. I know those who are familiar with the Act, it's actually available online. You could, those who have not seen it, you could just go there and maybe have a quick read. But basically, the particular section we are discussing today is Section 20 of the Data Protection and Privacy Act, Act 97, which basically states that a data collector is the person collecting the data. The data controller or data processor is any of you who actually receive the data and process it for clients, shall secure the integrity of the personal data in their possessions or control of the data collector, controller, data processor, or the data collector by adopting appropriate, reasonable, technical, and organizational measures to prevent loss, damage, or unauthorized processing of the personal data. Now, I want to put emphasis on the key areas that I've highlighted in bold: appropriate, reasonable measures. That means that whatever measures you put in place to protect the personal data must be proportional to the risk. So I'll give an instance. So you need to do, I think even the Act talks about those who have actually conducted data protection impact assessments. This DPIs help you evaluate the risk of the data you're going to be collecting, or maybe the intervention you're going to be doing, or maybe establishing within the organization, so that you can know exactly what risk appetite and know what measures you need to implement. So that's why the law stresses that it must be appropriate and reasonable. So if in case we find that whatever you've implemented does not really match the risk, then it cannot sell. The Act will hold you responsible. Then when we talk about technical and organizational, this stresses that we need to look at both the technical aspects of what you've implemented in terms of the measures that you can protect. For instance, now technical would be, from a security point of view, would be maybe implementation of things like firewalls, implementations of the antivirus protection, maybe passwords, the technical measures you can put to protect your systems and your data, but as well as organization. So there must be a combination. Now, on the organizational side, we're looking at things like having the right people and processes, things to do with policies, governance for this data, governance for these systems, as well as maybe training. Do you have DPOs in place? Have they been trained? Are they certified to actually handle, or anyone who's handling the data, do they understand the implication of, it could be a teller in a company, maybe at a bank or a telecom. Do they understand the implication of them leaking someone's phone number? So we check. The law stresses that all those must be emphasized. So emphasis is put on, or as you put the measures, they'll be measured and they'll be measured based on how you have done them. So this basically shows you that, especially on the technical and organizational aspect, that we need both to work together. You cannot have the technical without the operation and the people and processes aspect considered. in your strategies to make sure you remain compliant with the legal obligation. So what are the, when you talk about the physical world, now this is the data, the personal data that is actually present on things like paper, ID copies, application forms. How do we protect such data? One of the key risk areas that we face with such data is, for instance, if you have a scenario of an unauthorized physical access to an office or filing room, that means the unauthorized person or staff has entered a room where they're not supposed to enter, and they're able to access data that they're not actually supposed to access because there is no physical access restrictions. Okay, then places where you do not have what we call a clean desk or maybe a clear desk policies, where sensitive information is left out. This can, I could take you back to the story that I just gave you in the preamble, where you had the accountant leave the files open on their desk, and then the person who was social engineered, of course, without knowing, breached the data. So this is a classic example of physical risks that we can have when we leave sensitive information open on our desks. Then, of course, we have the other risk would be improper disposal. For instance, throwing confidential documents on trash. Just a few days ago, I don't know if the person is on the call, but someone I work with within the government space sent me a picture of a form. I think they were country. They bought a piece of chicken and then packed it in a pack in those paper bags, but it was made out of the paper that had someone's details. It was a form. I don't know what they're feeling, but it was basically a form that was picking data, and it had their number, their name, their date of birth. It had details of their children. It was a form that someone, they get those papers and then wrap them up and make those packages where they pack the stuff that we buy. The form was a form that was used for data collection before, and it had personal data, and now it was being used as a takeaway bag for food. So you can see how the improper disposal by the entity that actually collected this data the improper disposal would lead this particular personal data to be out on the streets. And if this person actually, the owner of this particular data subject, found this out and reported, this particular organization would not be compliant with the regulation, and this person has the right to sue and then come for you and maybe ask you to take responsibility for you not safeguarding the data. So these are some of the key risk areas that we see when it comes to personal physical data within the physical world. The picture there shows a classic example of a desk with critical information, but it's just left open there. And I'm sure we have several colleagues and they do not have to be technical people. This is just something that I think can be taken away with the awareness. So what strategies can we implement to control this? One is access control. So make sure this critical data is stored in places where you know who has access. Basically, there's control. You know who has access to it. That means you can have a fallback position in case there was a breach. In case there was a breach, you know that okay, this place cannot be accessed by so and so, because they're the ones who have the keys to the place. They're the ones who have the fingerprints. They're the ones whose biometrics work. So you need to have some access control so that anyone who's not authorized to access maybe a storage server, maybe a server room that has this data, or maybe a store that actually, maybe a file cabinet does not have access. Anyone who is not authorized to access is not allowed to access. You can also have access logs. We have in the systems that we implement now as government, as part of compliance, we recommend for audit modules within systems where we can see who accessed what at what time, then what was done. You don't have to be an administrator to do it, but the system on the back end does some sort of auditing. So we can have access logs to see who accessed the room, at what time were they accessing it, and you can even have policies around this that actually define what at what level should someone access? You don't expect someone to be accessing an office at midnight. So this can also be used for visitor management. The other approach would be clear desk policy, where you mandate that all physical or digital data is secured when not in active use. So if I have a file, a document, a form that is not in use at the time, there's no point in me leaving it in the open on the desk. I put it away, I shred it. Then secure disposal. Secure disposal basically looks like how you can use how you can secure a disposed data that you're not using through use of like shredders or certified disposal services. Because a paper like the one I just explained to you that was exposed by someone should not be out on the streets. If you're no longer using the data, shred it so that it doesn't leak. Then of course the core thing is the training of staff. Remember, this staff have to be beyond, not just IT, not technical people, not legal who understand the law, but even staff who deal with personal data. It could be at whatever level of the organization, because a breach can come from anywhere. You just don't know who's going to be the culprit. So training is key. And this we are happy that you're here today to learn. And I hope you can be able to implement some of the strategies that we're sharing today. So these are some of the strategies that you can employ for securing physical data. Now, when it comes to the digital data, this is data that we have that is digitally on our phones, on our computers, within the cloud. And this particular data faces different risks, but these ones are actually quite more dangerous and quite more sophisticated. So some of the key risk areas in this particular scenario are the cybersecurity attacks. They are a number, but the critical ones that we feel are the ones that fall in the range of phishing emails, malware, ransomware. These are the most common categories of attacks that could data that is available online faces. Then also we have scenarios of weak access credentials. For instance, where you have weak passwords. These weak passwords expose your data because as a security expert, I know for weak passwords, it takes maybe only microseconds for a hacker to actually penetrate your system if you're using weak passwords. So you have to do a lot of training in emphasizing use of passwords, that strong passwords, or maybe a strong password policy within the organizations. Then we also have a risk around unencrypted data transfers and storage, where you have transfer of data, but in a way that it's not safe. So you don't encrypt it, you just transfer data as it is. Then, of course, unsecured access. I know we have been after the COVID-19 pandemic, there's been growth in remote working for most of us. So there's a lot of access or remote work to different services and systems that people can work from home. But that particular intervention, or maybe automation to allow for remote work, also creates a challenge of exposure if the connection or the technology you're using to do the remote work is actually not safe. So in the digital world, these are the key areas that data might face, and these are some of the ways that we can actually protect them. So the first strategy you can implement is encryption. For encryption, you need to encrypt data at rest, as well as data in transit. Now, if I'm to explain encryption in simple terms, like how you can put data in a safe. So you put the data in safe, and even if someone gets access to this particular data, maybe someone steals a file, maybe someone is able to access your email in transit, they are not able to read that particular data without the key that is supposed to open it. So encryption helps us to, one, safely transfer data, because we need to transfer data, we need to collaborate. We cannot do well with the need to collaborate and transfer data, but it ensures that only the person that you've shared the decryption key, this time it's a decryption key, with has access to the data and is able to open or read the files that you've shared. Then the other intervention could be access management. Here we could implement principles of least privileges. That means that you minimize the number of staff, so that only staff that need to access the data, or maybe only staff that are based on their job description, only the staff that have are authorized to access or work on that particular data have access to that particular data. The other thing you could use is implementation of multi-factor authentication. And honestly, this one is no longer optional. Most of the services that we're running as government, I think banks and telecoms, have put this requirement where, for instance, when you log into a system, even if you're doing a mobile money transaction now, there's with the applications, there's need for the second factor authentication that comes through a different mechanisms like SMS. Now, this helps you minimize the risk of a data breach, or maybe someone unauthorized accessing the system without your authorizations. So a password alone is weak, but a password plus a code plus an SMS plus an SMS code plus maybe another code that comes through an authenticator app is considered stronger and maybe more secure, and it could help you, because the chances that a hacker can have access to, first of all, your password, that is easy, but your password and your phone and maybe your authenticator app at the same time, chances are quite minimal. Then we can also do regular updates and patching of our softwares. That means we keep the softwares, operating systems, and advanced programs updated. Statistics says it that in the world today, they release about 560,000 malwares every day. Now, these are what we call zero-day vulnerabilities. These malwares exploit zero-day vulnerabilities. That means by the time they come out, if your antivirus is not updated, it can be, this particular malware can exploit that vulnerability because it's a zero-day vulnerability that has just been found. So it's key that we regularly update our software, operating systems, as well as whatever endpoint protection programs we have on our systems. The last one would be to have backups. Okay, these backups must be maintained regularly. They must be tested. There are scenarios where you think you have a backup, but until you find yourself in a position where you have been breached or maybe hacked, you try to run back to the backup and you realize that actually you do not have, or the backup you have is actually for last year, or the backup you have is actually for last week. That means you've lost whatever you've done between Sunday and today. So you need to test your backups to make sure that they are actually usable. Some people have backups that they can't even use, but they'll tell you that they have systems that their systems are backed up and they can use them. Then, of course, key is that when you have these backups, they must be stored in different locations. What hackers usually do is they exploit the primary location and then be able to, if they are into your network and they are able to do lateral movements, they follow your backups to where you're storing them, and they also get the backup. So the best thing is to make sure your backups are separate, so that at least if the primary is breached, the backup is not breached. You could even have the backup of a physical drive that is not actually stored on the same system or the server. So with these, we confidently feel that once you have these, at least you can protect against these data breaches, and you can control. You can control the access. Okay? Then, of course, when it comes to like I'd explained, when it comes to these strategies, we have strategies that could be technical. What I was explaining before are the technical strategies, but then we also have strategies that are more around governance and operational, and these are now strategies that organizations can implement that handle the people issue. So there's a concept we call in cybersecurity now a human firewall, whereby you as an officer of an organization, maybe as a staff, you become the initial point of protection for this data. So how do we elevate, or maybe how do we promote our staff or ourselves to become people who are constantly looking out and ensuring that our systems and data is protected? One, we could develop, as an organization, we can develop data protection policies. These ones must be clearly understood by anyone. Once you put a policy document, even to the lowest level of staff, they should be able to understand it. So not so much technical jargon within the policy. It should be something that is easy to understand, and it must be regularly reviewed, because we know with technology things change. What you might have stressed as a guideline before, maybe last year, may not be applicable now, because probably there's been you realize that there's another way that people are actually breaching. So you need to put it within the policy now. So the policies have to be clear, very, very clearly understood, and regularly updated. So this policy will become more like a playbook that any officer can run to and know what to do in order to protect the personal data that they're actually working with. The other thing that we can do is to have an incident response plan in place. This can be utilized. It gives someone knowledge to know what to do when a breach occurs. I want you to note that it's not if, someone should know when, like in case it happens, they should be able to know what to do, not to wait that when it happens, they take the action. So they should know, it should be something that is practiced repeatedly, and it becomes a normal thing. So that if you know that, okay, there's been a breach within the organization, each and every staff that is involved in handling personal data should know exactly what to do. This plan can be stressed through training, through awareness, and also through dissemination across emails. And in most cases, some of these things are actually given to, even if you're just enrolling a new staff, you can have them, you can share these policy documents with them and have them clearly understand exactly what their responsibilities are when it comes to this. There's also another strategy we can employ where we do vendor management. Now, there's a recent, I cannot disclose the company, but there's a recent breach which happened within the country, within Uganda, and this particular one was from the third party. So you need to have some mechanism where you ensure that your third party processors, this could be consultants on board that are working with you, they could be the people developing the system, or maybe the cloud service providers where you're storing your data. You must ensure that these people are compliant with the Data Protection Act. The question would be now, if for instance, when it comes to cloud service providers, how about the guys who are not within the country, like Amazon and Google? You can find out which country they're actually hosting your data, which location is the server seated in, and then see whether they have a data protection office or maybe a data protection law there, and see if this is actually compliant. You can ask for the certificate and see if they are actually compliant with that particular country's Data Protection Act, so that you know that even if my data is not sitting in Uganda, it's sitting somewhere in another country, I can use that law to hold those people accountable. Then, of course, I stress the fact that there is need to train people regularly. So you need to conduct regular security awareness trainings that will combat the usual cybersecurity threats of phishing and social engineering. Most of the attacks, if you look at the statistics, you will notice that come through these two particular vectors: phishing and social engineering. So from what we discussed today, what do you, we have seen that in order for you to, from even the story that I started with of the farm that was breached, we must have a holistic approach that integrates both worlds, where you look at the physical world, where you have the paper, personal data on paper, as well as the digital world, where you have personal data on our computers, on our systems, or maybe on the cloud. Okay, so from this, we need to implement both strategies for both physical as well as physical data as well as data that is on the cloud, and integrate the two for us to feel like we have a holistic approach to our data protection or our data protection compliance, or maybe our data protection policy. So the role of you as a DPO is to oversee that both environments ensure consistency with both policies. So on the physical side, you've made sure that, for instance, you have a clean desk policy in place, you have an access control policy, but then you also have an incident maybe management or incident response policy to handle when it comes to the digital side, what happens, or maybe an access, how people should access, who should access, all those different things can be implemented holistically. Otherwise, we all know that, for instance, in an example that I've given here, a scanned contract, for instance, is digital, but it comes from, initially, it was a paper that was signed physically, and because both of them at whatever point, at the point when it's actually still a digital document on the cloud, on email, it's data. It can be breached at that point, but it can also be breached once it has been printed and signed and left on the table. So we need to have approaches that basically consolidate all these two different divergent worlds in order for us to have to say that we actually really compliant and we have proper consistent policies within our organizations. So what are the key takeaways from our discussion today? One, what is clear? The law is clear. You must implement proper security measures. There's no excuse, because if the measure is evaluated, for instance, whatever measures you put for a system, like let me use a health center. Let me use a health center 2 in maybe Mbarara or maybe Gulu. The kind of policies the health center 2 implements cannot be the same measures that the National Referral Hospital Mulago implements in terms of protecting the data, because we know that Mulago Hospital sees more clients, Mulago Hospital has more patients, and definitely the measures the Mulago Hospital has to implement should be more, because even the systems that are working within there are quite more. So the law is clear, you must implement appropriate. Whatever measure you put in place will be evaluated against the risk that the data that you have faces. Then, of course, we see that physical data is also at risk. So you need to secure access and also ensure proper disposal of physical data, even if it's paper. It's also at risk, not just the data that we have on emails and on the cloud. Then we have when it comes to digital data, because of the complexity of IT and systems, and with these new different cybersecurity threats that keep coming up, digital data needs to be layered out. You need to find different layers of protection beyond just having a password. You need to bring some other thing that basically minimizes the risk. So if you've put up a system that is collecting data, first of all, do you have controls in place? How is the data collected? You also need to practice data minimization. I'm talking about this one today, but it's basically don't collect any data that you do not actually need, especially if it's personal data, because the more personal data you have, the bigger you risk. So for digital data needs, it has to be layered out. You can have protection layers that are layered out. You can have the passwords, you can have the multi-factor authentications, you can also have patching. All these can be combined together to ensure that you're safe, because you never know where you find a hacker who has actually gotten your decryption key, but at least they do not have your multi-factor authentication code, or maybe they do not have the latest because you've patched, so they're not able to use the old virus to be able to penetrate the old malware to be able to penetrate your systems. So then we also have people, policies. People are key. So technology alone will fail if you do not train your people and if you don't come up with clear policy, clear procedures on how to manage data. So it goes beyond the technology. Even the people themselves, the guys that we are talking to today, you yourselves who are the DPOs, you need to be trained beyond the technology to be able to look out and see some of these gaps, okay? there's no technology that's going to tell you that someone has left something sensitive on the desk. No, it's your responsibility to train them and tell them this is not right because this would lead to ABCD for the organization. Then, of course, trust is your greatest asset. As anyone in, and I stress this, it's not about private sector, it's not about government. Even government now, we work more like private sector. If our clients are not happy, I started with the preamble of what Meter does, and you can see we offer quite a number of services. And these services come to you, they come to other government agencies. So if they're not happy and they do not trust us because we have leaked their information, then we lose credibility. So trust is the greatest asset, and you only lose trust if someone realizes that they trusted you with the data and you actually misused it for different purposes. So effective data protection builds client confidence and protects your reputation as an organization. Yeah, so at this point, I would like to stop here. Thank you very much for listening in. I'll let the moderator take over. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Johnson, for that very related risks and our legal obligations. And of course, most importantly, you have been able to share the practical strategies we can put in place in our organizations to protect the personal data within our custody. And of course, to re-echo the words of our speaker for the participants, trust is our greatest asset. Let's do all that we can to ensure that we are trusted by our clients. Now, allow me go to the Q&A. We have about a few questions in the Q&A panel. I continue to encourage all of us, please share questions related to today's webinar in the Q&A section so that we are able to take them. And if you have any other questions about the office, kindly share those on email and we'll be able to respond. So Johnson, our first question is, someone says, I recently came across information to AI tools. With AI now being integrated into organizational systems and
Anita, your network seems to be very
Johnson,
we can't hear you.
Oh, okay. Let me just repeat this.
Yeah, Anita, are you there?
Okay, apologies. My network is not the best today. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay, all right. So the first question we have here is, someone brings in a very interesting perspective on AI. He says, I recently came across a LinkedIn post highlighting the risk of employees feeding sensitive information into AI tools. With AI now being integrated into organizational systems and everyday workflows, how safe is the personal and company data when using these technologies? Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. May I know who asked the question, the name?
Robina.
Robina, okay. So to Robina, the way AI works is AI. Of course, there's been quite, like you say, there's ongoing integration within our day-to-day work processes, and we are constantly automating, and AI is not just about the usual things. Of course, there's been a bust around the GPTs that have come up, like ChatGPT and all these others, but AI has been there, the automation has been there behind most of the processes, most of the things that we've been doing. So the risk is there. The truth is the risk is there. That's why we need to build I talked about the people, people and processes. We need to be able to educate our people not to share any data that we could classify as sensitive. It starts from building responsibility. So you need to know who actually accesses that personal data, and then train them not to actually expose it, because you need to let them know the implication. The way AI works is whatever you give it, it saves it, because it's what other people are going. It's going to reference to be able to answer the next user's question. So AI stores this information. You cannot control, because you do not manage the AI system. You cannot control, like I said, you can't control what's beyond, what doesn't sit within your system. So we don't know what this data is going to be used for, and it can be used for so many other things. If you put a report today, and I ask this question about the same report, AI is going to use the same information you put in that report to give me an answer related to an organization. So the risk is there. The only way we can solve this is to extensively train, and also put policies in place. We can have an information classification policy for sensitive data, where now you tell staff, look, if it comes to things to do with A, B, C, D, this is considered highly confidential and it can never be shared on AI. But also there are solutions that are coming up that can also restrict sharing even within the same workspace. There's a presentation that we were having within NITA of a solution that actually, once you integrate it, you limit, you automate, you have an AI that is controlled by your organization, and basically screens through whatever information is loaded on an AI tool, and it will block whatever you've classified as highly confidential information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, Johnson, I don't know if you don't mind, could I take like 3 questions at a go? Is that okay with you?
That's okay.
Okay, all right. So first question is, Chilia says, what metrics or KPIs beyond compliance checkboxes are truly convincing boards to invest in robust data protection strategies? How do we translate security into business value? And the second question, Daniel says, what should employees do if they accidentally share customer information with a wrong recipient? And then the third question I'm going to take, Tom says, for data storage and backup, which service provider can you recommend? Over to you, Johnson.
Okay, so I'll start with the last one, data storage and backup. Service providers, I honestly cannot, if you're government, I would recommend working with NITA. We do, like I said, we have the data center services, so we can have discussions on how you can store your data. In terms of service providers, I cannot really recommend. I've not done a comprehensive analysis on who, but you can check on their ratings as service providers if they are in. There's a service called the Gartner chart. If you're looking at international companies, where you can see companies that have very good reputation in terms of backups. But you could even write to us and we can actually be able to recommend. But I don't think it would be in order for me to market companies here. So, but if it's government, you can engage NITA. NITA does these services, but also in the private sector, we can have a one-on-one, and then I can show you how to basically check companies' compliance and reputation around some of these services you're looking for. Then the next question was around what can an employee do if they realize that they've exposed company data? The first thing, of course, this comes from in terms of governance and policy. What does the policy say? You must first have a policy in place. The policy would basically advise the employee what next to do. But usually what this policy is, the standard based on ISO standards, when it comes to these, if it's personal data, one, in terms, the regulation requires that you report a breach within 72 hours. But there are activities that you can do before the 72 hours to fully understand, because the breach reporting template that the PDPO office offers asks for certain information that you must have prepared for before you actually report for the breach. So the key thing is, one is to, once you identify that there's been a data breach, is depending on the nature of the data breach as well. What kind is it? A cybersecurity attack? Is it ransomware? Because those procedures are also very different. So the policy, have a policy in place, first of all, that determines what actions you take in terms of incident response. But the first thing to do is isolating the system as well, in case, because that you stop any continuous exposure of the data. Then do engage your IT team. If you're not very technical, engage the IT team to understand what exactly what system it is. Report to them and tell them, look, I think this has been exposed. There's also regarding the data protection regulation, you might need to inform the data subject that there's a possibility that if data leaked. So in case this person sees it, at least you've actually notified them. So this the whole incident response procedure depends on what the organization has come up with, but it's also very specific in terms of the nature of the breach. Cybersecurity attacks are handled differently depending on the magnitude of the attack, but also breaches that are minimal also could be handled within the organization. You can decide. That's why there's a requirement to conduct a data protection impact assessment that would tell you, that would categorize and give you the risk appetite for the data, and then you would know which steps to take in case there's a breach. Then also, to answer the last question, if you can repeat the last question from Kiria, it wasn't very clear.
Okay, so he asked what metrics or KPIs beyond compliance checkboxes are truly convincing boards to invest in robust data protection strategies. He wants really to know how we can translate security into business value.
Okay, so you can have. I hope I understand it. I understood the question more, but you could come up with internal dashboards that basically focus on looking at the edge of your systems. You look at what possible exposures are you getting. Like for instance, of course, there are technologies we use within the SAC where we see, for instance, a country like Uganda, how many threats are we getting in a second, and they're targeting particular IPs. So if you're technical enough to get that information and be able to categorize what is actually coming to you, now you can use these dashboards or metrics in terms of, so that means you would know that, okay, look, because we have ABCD systems which run a certain, which run on a certain server, or maybe which run on a certain a language in terms of development language or programming language, and on the international scale, these ones are being attacked every second or every hour, and you have these dashboards which you're looking at now. These would be metrics that you can use to justify to your management to invest more in security. So as long as, for instance, you're using a system like, let me say, Microsoft Word, and you know Microsoft Word is highly vulnerable, based on these statistics, you can use that to justify additional investment in cybersecurity within the organization. So that could be, I hope that kind of gives him light to his question.
Okay, thank you so much, Johnson. I can see it's already midday. We have run out of time, but please allow me take about only 3 questions because we have a lot of questions in the Q&A. Allow me take only about 3 and then we end it there.
Okay, so, proceed.
Ruth asks if there is any designated place for dispose of outdated IT hardware equipment. And then the next question is from Alex. He says, you emphasized both physical and digital data security as well as the importance of a holistic approach. How can small organizations with limited resources practically implement both physical and digital data protection strategies without compromising either side? And then the last question that I'm going to take, Gladys says, Johnson, you have talked about having a backup on a different drive. Okay, this question is kind of not clear. You have talked about having a backup on a different drive or servers. How can you do that if your organization doesn't allow such and you cannot keep it on your machine? Johnson, I don't know if the question is clear for you because it's not on my end.
Yeah, I think I'll start with that. So she's asking, how can you, of course, I stressed having a backup, and she's asking if the organization does not allow you to basically maybe use a flash or hard drive to back up the data. What do you do? Of course,
Yes, okay.
so Gladys, that this would start from what the organization policy says. So if it doesn't allow, of course, you cannot, there are reasons why it was put in place, and you cannot individually decide to be the one to do the backup. Usually, like I said, follow what the policies and procedure within the organization asks you to do. You cannot say, because I am the DPO, I am going to be the one to do the backups. Usually the IT people have ways that they do it that you may not be privy to. But also, the backup does not necessarily have to be physical. The physical was one. The physical maybe recommendation was for on a personal basis. If you do not have access to cloud, you could do it. I do it myself. So for my personal data, because even your personal data, it could be your birth certificates, all these things that you might lose at any time, if in case your laptop is compromised, in case you face a ransomware attack, whereby you completely have no access to your system, to your files. So that one you can do manually, but for the organization, it's what the policy says. But the backup does not have to be manual. Some of these organizations actually back up on the cloud. A cloud is just basically another drive, maybe another computer for someone else that is just not seated in your location. So it's not anything besides what the normal transfer to a hard drive would be. It's just that it's not really in your physical location. Then the next question was on how entities, the small SMEs, that how do they implement the holistic approach? So of course there are things that you can do without budgets. Things like implementing on the organizational side, things like training, policies, having policies in place, establishing a clean desk policy. This can even be done. You can have the policy in place and have within the policy have clauses for that talk about basically address areas of non-compliance if a staff doesn't comply to these. Now, these particular ones don't really need a lot of budgets around them. These you can start with some of those ones. Now, where you need to use when it comes to digital things, like encryption, like the recommendations I gave, encryption, using stronger passwords, these also do not really need policy. So you can still work within what you have. And for me, I feel that even an organization as simple as a primary school or maybe a nursery school, starting from the student application form where you have details of the parents, how do you file it? Now, that consideration is not even looking at what budget you have. Look at what the law says. Then within your budget, okay, if I have one office here, but maybe can I buy a metallic safe, or maybe a file cabinet that is lockable with a padlock? That is the first thing you do. So you can still implement measures within your control. We're not asking you to do things that ordinarily a big organization would do, but find things that you can do within the small budgets you have, but at least ensure that you have done the appropriate thing based on the sensitivity of the information. If information is too sensitive, like I told you, practice data minimization. Don't collect it because it's going to increase your risk appetite, or store it somewhere else. Find another mechanism. Maybe back it up now and pay some money because you're collecting it. But if it's not necessary, just keep it out of your space. Then I think the last one was on. You can repeat the one from Ruth.
So Ruth was asking if there is any designated place for disposal of outdated IT hardware equipment.
Okay, so we do not have a designated space right now, but there are things that you can do, especially if you're disposing IT equipment to protect the data. you could, we recommend, for instance, clean wiping hard drives. In government, when we are disposing of computers like laptops, we physically remove the hard drives and then clean wipe them or destroy them so that they cannot be repurposed and then someone can recover that data. So we have, though government, we currently have a center, but it's not really designated for only hardware, but we have a center in Nakasongola that has been put up, but we're also working on establishing regional e-waste centers as NITA. I think we're putting one in Bara and one in on the north, in the north as well. So these ones should, you can utilize them as citizens and say, okay, now I'm done with this thing. You can bring them here and we shall use the proper e-waste disposal procedures to be able to dispose of this e-waste from you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Johnson. Your presentation was very practical, and on behalf of the office, I would like to say thank you so much for that. And I believe the participants have been able to pick something that is going to be helpful in their organizations. I have shared a link in the chat. Kindly click on it for the members attending. Click on it and give us feedback on this training. The feedback you give us allows us to continually adapt training to better suit your needs. Johnson, I'm getting back to you for parting shots.
Okay, I just want to thank everyone who took time off and came, and I hope that the discussion has been very impactful. I can see people are asking for the presentation. I think, Anita, you will respond to that. But largely, I thank you for attending, and I hope you have learned. I just empower everyone to take responsibility. The Ugandan Act is a bit soft, but when you go to other countries, there is a responsibility that actually falls on the data protection officer, where if in case there is a data breach, you are actually held personally responsible, or not, or maybe the person who's actually processing. So let's be very careful and very cautious when we're dealing with this when we're dealing with personal data. For me, I feel like if you do not need certain data, do not collect it, because it just increases your risks around the data subjects that you're dealing with. So with that, I thank everyone for attending, and I hope you have a blessed day.
Okay, thank you so much, Johnson. It has been a great pleasure hosting you. For those that have been asking for the presentation and the recording is already available on our YouTube channel. And these resources will as well be shared on the emails that you used to register for today's training. And of course, thank you so much for joining us today, to all the participants, and for your active participation. We hope you found the session insightful and practical in understanding how to safeguard client data, both physically and of course digitally. Before we close, I would like to highlight the ongoing Vela Kugad campaign, which started this month and will run for the next 3 months. The campaign is being championed by the Personal Data Protection Office and the National Information Technology Authority, NITAU. It is aimed to raise awareness about data protection and cybersecurity across Uganda. It is happening online on different digital platforms, TV, radio, among others. The campaign basically encourages everyone, whether youth, whether the elderly, the business owners, everyone really, to stay alert and protect their personal information, both online and offline. You can take part by following its messages via our different BeSafe online platforms. You will find the different BeSafe online platforms on X, formerly Twitter, on LinkedIn, on TikTok, and IG. We also continue to encourage you to apply the safe data practices in your daily life, in your organizations, and continue spreading the word. Remember, Vela Kugad is about staying vigilant and keeping your data safe. Once again, thank you so much, Johnson, our speaker for today, and thank you to all the participants for joining us today. Stay safe, stay informed, and Vela Kugad. Have a wonderful day.